Hey everyone, welcome back to the Maximum Human Potential YouTube channel. Now today's topic is going to be one of my all-time favourite supplements for performance, arachidonic acid. Now what is arachidonic acid? Quite simply, arachidonic acid is an omega-6 fatty acid. It naturally occurs in our diets already, so you can get it from nuts, from seeds, from meat, from eggs. If you wanted to get it from your actual diet, not as a supplement, in order to get an efficacious dose, you'd have to eat either 400 grams of boiled beef kidney or 5.5 pounds of beef brisket, okay? So it's not really a sustainable or an easy thing to get in that much arachidonic acid from a dietary source, which is why we want to use a supplement. Now, do I use this year round? No. And I'll explain why that is in a second, because I find it's a bit more effective when used in short phases for a specific purpose. But to understand that purpose, we'll go into the mechanism of how it works. So there's these things called prostaglandins. So they're a group of lipids that are made at sites in the body that are damaged or infected. So if you get a cut, there'll be prostaglandins formed. And if you damage your muscle fibers during training, there's prostaglandin formation. And the prostaglandins help mediate the inflammatory processes, the blood flow, the formation of clots, and a lot of other processes like that. So now the thing about the prostaglandins is they're derived from this arachidonic acid. So the theory being, if we increase our pool of arachidonic acid, which we can draw from, we can generate more prostaglandins and then get more of a positive response to training. And that is exactly what appears to happen. So one of the most sort of surprising studies about arachidonic acid, they had one group taking 1.5 grams per day and another group that was a control. And the group with supplementing with arachidonic acid, they're both doing the exact same training program for 8 weeks. They put on 1.6 kilograms of lean mass, which is huge, whereas the control put on no lean mass. They also had a statistically significant increase in bench press strength and power output on a Wingate bike. Now, there is a little bit of mixed data on this supplement, and I'll get to why that is in 1 second. So, what I found for my personal use, and from everyone that's done it, which is not mentioned in literature, is when you use arachidonic acid, the burn and pump is absolutely insane. So I remember the first time I did this, I had something like 5 sets of 10 in the squat, and I had to reduce the weight to something ridiculously light, because literally after like rep 5, my legs were on fire, my lower back was pumped. And between sets, I had to lie down because I was in that much pain. So the pump and burn is completely insane. It's almost, the way I like to describe this supplement to clients is, think about that first time in the gym, okay? Like your first time doing a bench press, or like say, let's just use a chest workout as an example. You do a few sets of bench press and your triceps and pecs already feel torn and pumped beyond belief. And it's actually a battle just to make it through the entire workout. You almost want to give up after that first exercise because you're just so spent. Now that is what training like arachidonic acid's like. It's the way I describe it to people is it resets your sensitivity to training again. So when you train, it feels like it's that first time in the gym, and there's those gnarly pumps. You're literally feeling almost fibers being torn with every rep. That's what it feels like, and the soreness from it is absolutely unreal. Now, the downside of this is that it limits the total load you can lift because the pump is so intense and there's so much fatigue and metabolic stress generated from every rep. So this means you can't use your normal training loads. They have to be pulled back quite a bit, and it'd obviously be a bit more suitable to a hypertrophy or a metabolic phase where you're not as concerned about the total load lifted. It also brings me to another great use for it, which is when you're injured. When you're injured, it's a great time to throw arachidonic acid in, because now you can get an awesome training effect with a much lesser load. So it almost feels like occlusion training. Someone just trying to message me. almost feels like occlusion training without occlusion bands. Now, how do I like to implement this? Well, since we've established it needs to be done in a hypertrophy phase, there's two ways you can use it. So you can either use it in an undulating fashion. So for example, let's say you've got an undulating periodization model where you do 2 weeks hypertrophy, 2 weeks strength, 2 weeks hypertrophy, 2 weeks strength, and you alternate those phases back and forth. So what you could do is during your hypertrophy phases, you take arachidonic acid and then you stop taking it during those intensification or strength phases. Now what this is going to do, you're going to get a much better response from that hypertrophy phase, and then you can pull that out and you'll really, that'll translate into some better results, better gains in strength, because you've got such a robust response in that hypertrophy phase. Then you pull the arachidonic acid out, then you get stronger, then you go back into hypertrophy, up your dose of arachidonic acid, then back down to strength, pull the arachidonic acid out, and so on. So that's a great way to do it. Another way would be, let's say you're doing a hypertrophy block, like 8 weeks, and you're increasing the volume or intensity throughout, or manipulating the variables so you get an overload from week 1 to week 8. What you can do is just take the arachidonic acid for the entire time, so 6 to 8 weeks, however long you plan your hypertrophy phases, and you just ramp up the dose every 2 weeks or so, or when it becomes less effective. So in a lot of the studies, the efficacious dose they use is about 1.5 grams of arachidonic acid. Now what I've found is I actually like to start with the minimum effective dose. So for a lot of people, they'll actually get a decent response out of 2. Just to preface that, so most arachidonic acid comes in 250 milligram tablets. So 2 of those is 500 milligrams. That's generally a good starting point. But you want that soreness, you want that pump. So I tried 2 tablets at the first workout. If that doesn't work, you increase to 3. If that doesn't work, increase to 4, and so on. And 2, you're getting that robust response from arachidonic acid, and it really is unmistakable. So if you're not feeling it, you up that dose. So what I'd like to do, for instance, for myself, one of my clients, would be we start at 2. We'll just use that. We'll go back to the example of the linear hypertrophy block. So 8 weeks of pure hypertrophy. We might use 500 milligrams, 2 pills the first 2 weeks. Then we up it to 1 gram. Then we up it to 2 grams. Then 3 grams. Then 4 grams. Okay, so we're increasing in a stepwise fashion every 2 weeks. But I really, supplementation really needs to be individualized. I don't like these arbitrary numbers. It's going to depend on your body weight. It's going to depend on how you personally react to that supplement. How long it takes your body to adapt to that supplement will be how often you need to ramp up. So I would just start with a minimum dose, and then once you stop feeling as pumped and sore, increase it, and then increase it again, and continue that for 6 to 8 weeks, and then you go into your strength block. Likewise, if you're doing the undulating model, you could start with 500 milligrams 2, then you go to strength for 2 weeks, stopping the arachidonic acid, then you go back on the arachidonic acid, go up to 1 gram, and then you go back to strength, and then you go to 1.5 or 2 grams, and so on. So it's really about listening to your body and seeing how it affects you, and then ramping up accordingly. Now, when not to use this? Well, when you've got a strength competition coming up, or you want to test a 1 max, we need to get our nervous system used to those heavy loads. And arachidonic acid is going to make it more difficult to hit those heavy loads, even in like a medium rep range, because of those metabolic factors, that pump, that burn, and that soreness that we talked about. So you're going to get a lot more muscular fatigue. There will be less neural fatigue while you're doing it because the loads will be down, which is a benefit. But we want to attenuate that muscular fatigue when we're at the end of a peaking phase leading up to competition. So if it's an important competition, I would not use this supplement about 8 weeks out, because we really want that to be a proper peaking phase. If it's not an important competition and you still, as a secondary goal, you're trying to still add muscle mass, and you've got the long-term picture of building a base in mind, then I'll just make sure you don't use it for those 2 to 4 weeks before the competition. So there you have it, guys. That's arachidonic acid, one of my favourite supplements to break past the plateau. because it really seems to resensitize the body to the training process. So any questions, comment below.